They say everyone wears a mask, but what happens when the mask slips? In the high-stakes world of celebrity courts, one man's carefully crafted image was about to be shattered, revealing the raw, untamed truth hiding beneath the surface. Enter Sean Combs, better known to millions as Diddy, a name that evokes images of lavish parties, chart-topping hits, and a seemingly unbreakable facade. But what happens when the carefully orchestrated dance of fame and fortune collides with the unforgiving reality of the legal system? It all began on a seemingly ordinary day in a tightly packed courtroom, where the weight of public scrutiny hung thick in the air. On one side sat Diddy, the embodiment of confidence dressed in a tailored suit, his demeanor polished to perfection. On the other side was the tension of impending revelations, the kind you could almost feel crackling between the plaintiffs and defense. What they didn't know was that this case would serve as a crucible, revealing layers of a man's psyche that many dared to ignore. As the court proceedings unfolded, the background noise of murmurs swelled into a cacophony, a signal of anxiety vibrating between the people present. Before long, all eyes were locked on the judge as he prepared to play a crucial audio recording. Until now, the trial had danced around allegations, building suspense like a thriller novel with each passing testimony. But this recording promised to take the entire narrative and flip it on its head. Imagine the scene. The judge raises his hand, silencing the room. In the subsequent quiet, a palpable tension descends, the audience on the edge of their seats, hearts racing with curiosity. A voice fills the room, Diddy's voice, each syllable a heavy hammer striking the anvil of his reputation. Listeners are flooded with the visceral quality of raw emotion. It's as if a window into the mind of an enigmatic artist has just swung wide open. The audio laid bare a side of Diddy that few had seen. It captured a moment of desperation and anger, revealing the essence of a man grappling with immense pressure. It was shocking, even terrifying, an emotional tempest that seemed to swirl around the demeanor of someone known for their composure. This was not the polished mogul audiences were accustomed to. This was a glimpse into the chaos of a mind under siege. Psychology teaches us that under extreme stress, one's true self often bleeds through the facade. Listening to the emotional tape, one could feel it, how pressure can distort reality, how pride can morph into fear, and how vulnerability can diminish even the fiercest warriors. Yet, rather than feeling sympathy for Diddy, murmurs of judgment rippled through the crowd. It was as if they had entered a room filled with strangers, where every slight shift in position was met with scrutiny. When you inhabit the glaring spotlight, even the smallest crack in the armor can be magnified. What lay underneath that audio recording was an embodiment of a man desperately attempting to maintain his grasp on identity. The pressure built up over years, navigating the labyrinth of fame, weaving his way through allegations, expectations, and relentless public eye, had taken its toll. Diddy wasn't just fighting a legal battle, he was battling his demons, the shadows stretching forth and entangling him. As the audio played, you could hear echoes of a caged lion attempting to unleash its roar, desperate and wounded. The recording unveiled a series of chilling statements, peppered with anger and confusion, as Diddy lashed out at those close to him. Friends, associates, perhaps even rivals, people who had seen too much and knew too many of his secrets. It was a raw and unfiltered glimpse of a psyche, wrestling with betrayal and paranoia, demonstrating how quickly relationships can unravel under pressure. Now, take a step back and think about it. Diddy was not just another celebrity. He was a brand, a culture, an institution that morphed the music, fashion, and business landscapes. As whispers of discontent murmured within the courtroom, the facade began to crack, and fear clawed at the edges of his carefully constructed empire. His empire wasn't just about music, it was about influence, and here in this courtroom, everything seemed in jeopardy. With every line played in that courtroom, the collective consciousness of those who idolized him began to waver. People began to wonder, was the suave persona just an act? Were the smooth lyrics a mask for the chaotic storm roiling beneath? The common perception of charismatic confidence blurred when contrasted against the vulnerability threaded throughout the audio. A jarring reminder that even gods can bleed. The mood in the room shifted with the same quicksilver quality as the audio. Listeners leaned in closer, captivated by the duality of fear and power that reverberated throughout the recordings. Here was Diddy, the archetype of success, fighting back the panic swirling inside him with desperate bravado. Male bravado is often praised, with numerous studies indicating that society expects men to display strength over vulnerability. Yet this encounter showcased a departure from that narrative. By exposing his fears, Diddy inadvertently flipped the script on what it meant to embody masculinity in a world that idolizes dominance over fragility. As the clips continued, each powerful confession drew reactions from the courtroom, a mix of shock, sympathy, and morbid curiosity. It was extraordinary, a reminder of the delicate balance everyone walks between vulnerability and strength. Here in this courtroom, revelations and consequences intermingled mercilessly, the stakes growing higher with every utterance. The audio took the audience on a roller coaster, weaving themes of loyalty and trust with undertones of deception. It began to weave a narrative that struck at the heart of human psychology, the complexity of relationships, and the myriad ways in which they can pivot on the axis of betrayal. Diddy's words were like arrows, aimed at enemies but unintentionally deflecting back to the very relationships that had given him strength. The betrayal woven through his voice highlighted that vulnerability can often host an atmosphere ripe for manipulation. Amidst the tension, courtroom drama played out like a high-stakes thriller. The prosecutor, eyes alight with anticipation, pounced on the opportunity to dissect Diddy's character, revealing how even the slightest slip could unearth deeper layers of greed and dishonesty. The power dynamics at play were palpable, revealing a world where the courtroom theater held the potential for both redemption and destruction. This moment serves as an opportunity to reflect on the psychology of power. When placed under scrutiny, the true essence of one's character emerges. Diddy, who had spent a lifetime crafting a powerful narrative, quickly became a pawn in a larger game. This courtroom was a microcosm, reflecting the societal structures in which we operate, where vulnerability is often punished rather than embraced. Much like how a marionette's strings tug at the very essence of its existence, so too was Diddy's freedom, tied to the puppeteers of his past and present. As the shocking audio continued to bombard the atmosphere, the overwhelming sensation of vulnerability began to saturate the room.
Caught in this whirlwind of chaos, Diddy transformed from a celebrated icon to an embodiment of fear and desperation, revealing that the weight of expectation can sometimes crush the spirit. Perhaps it was a catalyst for change, a moment where the embrace of authenticity could reshape his legacy. The courtroom proceedings pressed on, but all eyes remained glued to Diddy, each segment of audio unraveling his carefully controlled narrative. As the judge leaned in closer to examine the next clip, the anticipation in the room shifted palpably. It became clear Diddy's well-guarded empire was on the brink of crumbling. What unfolded next would outline the very nature of consequences, echoing throughout the lives they touched. Because this wasn't just a courtroom, it was a stage. It was a dramatic interpretation of lives intertwined by success, betrayal, and ambition, a chilling reminder of what happens when the masks we wear begin to fracture. What would the fallout be from the audio leaks? Would this revelation change the public's perception forever? Or would Diddy rise like a phoenix, stronger than ever? The courtroom held its breath. The stage was set for the climax of a tale that revealed much more about the man beneath the surface than anyone anticipated. As the gears of justice continued to turn, one question loomed larger than all others. Could Diddy navigate this tempest of public scrutiny and personal chaos? Or would it become a bitter chapter he'd never recover from? What truths would he confront, and how would they challenge the very fabric of his identity? Hope hung thick in the air, yet the shadows of uncertainty gathered, ready to reshake everything. As the audio took one final turn, the courtroom awaited a resolution, brimming with intrigue, anxiety, and anticipation, the world standing witness to an unraveling story, every bit as intoxicating as the life of Sean Combs himself. What happens when the weight of public scrutiny becomes too heavy for even the strongest persona to bear? As the courtroom door creaked open, the tension was palpable, hearts raced, and the air crackled with anticipation. The unexpected arrival of a mysterious figure tilted the balance of power in a way no one could have foreseen. The eyes of the audience, once fixated on Diddy, shifted dramatically toward the entrance.
This was a moment frozen in time, a psychological pivot that would unpack even deeper layers of drama and reveal truths weaved within the fabric of celebrity and identity. As the figure stepped forward, murmurs rippled through the crowd. It was an attorney, yes, but not just any attorney. It was Mackenzie Banks, a sharp-witted litigator with a reputation for dissecting complex cases and exposing the untold stories hidden beneath the surface. The air surrounding her seemed charged with a specific energy, a sense of urgency, as if she'd arrived not just to defend Diddy, but to unearth the unpredictable nature of the unfolding saga. Her reputation for being relentless was renowned. She had previously taken on harsh corporate giants and emerged victorious. But today, her challenge lay with someone who had shaped the fabric of pop culture and music. At that moment, a collective breath was held. The sense of anticipation felt like an electric shock racing between the rows of spectators. Did this piece of evidence mark a turning point in Diddy's tumultuous journey? Or would it plunge him deeper into the volatile whirlpool of allegations? As she spoke, the courtroom lights dimmed slightly, plunging the gathering into an immersive environment reminiscent of an edge-of-your-seat thriller. The screens before them flickered to life, revealing a series of text messages that Diddy had exchanged prior to the audio leak. From mundane chatter about upcoming concerts to cryptic messages that hinted at a growing sense of paranoia, each message painted a vivid picture of a man grappling with his identity and the pressures accompanying fame. It was raw and revealing, a deep dive into the psyche of a superstar at a crossroads. The messages played like a silent film, each snapshot telling a story of its own. "They want to take me down," one read, a line that resonated more deeply than anyone could have anticipated. In that moment, Diddy transformed from just a public figure under scrutiny into a profoundly human character, navigating fears of isolation and dismissal amid his towering success. The audience leaned in, enthralled by the tangible articulation of his emotions: fear, anger, a desperate urge for control, each sentiment thrumming as an underlying narrative. Diddy was once revered, almost elevated to mythological status in the eyes of the public.
Yet with these leaked messages, we began to understand his vulnerabilities, painting him in shades he'd worked tirelessly to dodge. This phenomenon highlights how our perception can be drastically reshaped as new experiences alter our understanding. Diddy's descent from the lofty heights of fame was an unsettling reminder of just how fragile our constructs can truly be. Her words echoed through the courtroom, chillingly resonant with the complex dynamics at play. "You see, Your Honor, this man is not just a pop icon. He is a human being, swept away by forces he did not create." This assertion cast a new light on the digital age's relentless scrutiny, where the line between public persona and private despair was often blurred. Yet as the lights flickered back to their harsh realities, Mackenzie's mesmerizing narrative held a double edge, wrapping Diddy tighter in a complex web of empathy and responsibility. How accountable is one for their actions when overwhelmed by self-preservation? Societal expectations weighed heavily, presenting yet another layer of complexity to offer reason for Diddy's invocations of anger and distress. There's a paradoxical tension here. On one hand, audiences celebrated the rise of their heroes, while simultaneously ripping them apart at the first sign of a crack. It's an uncomfortable truth dug from the annals of social psychology, how the familiar faces of stardom, fall from grace, can create a vortex of ruthless judgment that drags them down like an anchor. In this shifting paradigm, Mackenzie painted Diddy's turmoil as an overarching narrative of the times, a cautionary tale intricately woven into the very fabric of fame. As whispers filled the courtroom, Diddy's face flickered, a whirlwind of emotions crossing his features: incredulity, sorrow, and a reluctant acknowledgement of the truth housed within both his actions and words. Each revelation threaded deeper into the collective consciousness, igniting both sympathy and skepticism alike. How far would this humanization of Diddy extend? Would it be enough to mend the rift torn by the audio leaks? But just as the tide seemed to shift, a curveball tore through the courtroom. Another member of the jury, a seasoned woman in her 60s, raised her hand and requested the floor from the judge. With a voice that carried a surprising weight, she declared, Mr.
Her words resonated, crashing against the defense like waves against a shore, igniting a smoldering conflict that had laid dormant beneath the surface. Diddy's expression tightened, a flash of anger sparking momentarily. Here was the crux of the situation laid bare, the duality of celebrity and responsibility. In an age where one's actions ripple outwards like a stone cast into water, Diddy stood on a precipice. His smooth transition from the highs of a music mogul to the depths of a courtroom drama illustrated a vital truth. In celebrity culture, celebrity alone does not absolve one of culpability. The tension wrapped itself around the room, suffocating at times as the tension met reality at every turn. This poignant reminder of personal accountability, wrapped in the gravity of those becoming vicarious champions through the artist's actions, fractured the emotional safety net, challenging folks to face their own expectations of celebrity figures. Social psychologist Edward Gesey's research on intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation looms starkly within the context of celebrity behavior. While fame often comes with the allure of external approval, the intrinsic motivations, happiness, authenticity, connection, often become casualties in the race for validation. Diddy's internal struggle illuminated this fault line beautifully, underscoring the emotional and ethical dilemmas faced by public figures striving for genuine expression amidst the relentless pursuit of success. As the courtroom proceedings continued, Diddy found himself wrestling with an on-screen image that felt painfully at odds with his internal narrative. What began as enigmatic assertions transformed into confessions, painted with the vulnerability of someone stripped bare by circumstance. Moments flared up and then faded again, with words of anger flitting in and out of existence like erratic flames influencing the temperature in a room beset by embers waiting to ignite. Then came the audio recordings once again. Snippets resurfaced to haunt him, echoing like ghosts trapped within the ethereal chambers of his psyche. "I am not a monster. I am your king," one segment rang out, brimming with defiance yet tinged with an unmistakable vulnerability. The juxtaposition was powerful, a king being challenged within his own realm. This wasn't merely a defense against the charges being thrown at him. It was a raw exposé of a soul fraying at the seams, pleading for understanding amidst living contradictions. It was a delicate dance of self-assertion, hovering between bravado and fragility. Here, Diddy exhibited an important lesson. Declarations of strength often emerge from wounds unhealed, a striking metaphor for resilience and vulnerability intermingled. This recognition is crucial. The line between confidence and fear can often blur, exposing the haunting consequences of the expectations layered onto public figures. In the midst of this psychological tension, another attorney interjected, seeking to shake the foundations of empathy being constructed around Diddy. "But isn't it derived from privilege, mister?" she pressed, her tone pointed, dissecting the narrative that had begun to secure a fragile understanding of humanity. This pivotal moment ignited raw emotion, overriding the previously established sympathy, shaking the very ground Diddy stood upon. Would he be seen as a victim or as a man who operated within a privilege? A person who breathed life into both empowerment and destruction? The courtroom bore witness to the psychological battleground, the stakes rising as questions of authority, responsibility, and humanity emerged from the contentious exchange of ideas. With each volley, Diddy's patience thinned, an inner tempest building as the wandering lines between humanity and power continued to intertwine. Each question was a mirror, reflecting the duality in his persona, conflicting pressures tearing him apart as if to reveal a raw, authentic truth or to shatter him completely. Would he maintain his grounded stance, or would he succumb to the swirling tempest that raged in his heart? And then, a singular moment crystallized in the charged atmosphere. "Call me what you will," Diddy said, his voice steadying in tone. "But understand this, I am human. I am flawed." The resonance of those words sank into every corner of the courtroom, an anchor amidst the chaos that surrounded him. A hand extended outward, reaching for understanding. As the final statements echoed in the charged air, it became abundantly clear that the conflict extending beyond the courtroom held truths mirrored in countless people's lives. Diddy stood as a testament to the elasticity of humanity, embodying life's messiness and the continual ebb and flow of struggle and triumph, vulnerability and resilience.
How often do we fail to recognize that behind every public figure lies an intricate tapestry of contradictions? As the audience held its collective breath, an electrifying question remained threaded through the tumultuous episode. Would this courtroom serve as a sanctuary for understanding, or simply a battleground for judgment? With the narrative at a critical juncture, both Diddy's fate and the perspectives held by the public hung in a delicate balance, perilously close to tipping over into the unforgiving abyss. The shifting tides of perception and reality flowed endlessly as the echo of his words bounced against the walls. How would history remember this moment? Would it be the tragic downfall of a legend, the manifestation of deep-rooted fears, or the awakening of a new identity tethered to authenticity? As the hearing continued in a world alive with pulses of judgment and empathy, the soul of a man once deemed a king began to reveal itself, raw and intricate. Would the revelations continue to fracture Diddy's empire, or carve a new path toward redemption in the annals of his life and legacy? Only time would begin to uncover the full consequences of a courtroom showdown, where the clash of humanity, celebrity, and vulnerability entangled in a way that would linger far beyond the confines of law. What happens when the unassailable king of the music world is brought low by the very thing that once elevated him? The courtroom buzzed with an electric mixture of anticipation and dread, shadows flickering as the light from the overhead fixtures battled with the dark undertones of the proceedings. It was here, in this crucible of conflict, that Sean Diddy Combs stood at the brink of an emotional cataclysm, one that threatened to expose not just the man but everything he had built, an empire precariously balanced on a knife's edge. Just moments ago, the courtroom was a theater buzzing with scripted roles and well-rehearsed lines. The judge, the jury, the attorneys, each person filled with their unique invocations of authority and certainty. But as the startling audio leak unveiled the intricacies of Diddy's tumultuous inner world, everything turned to chaos. The weight of expectation hung heavy in the air as the audience bore witness, hearts racing, their collective gaze fused upon the figure of a man unraveling. Imagine, if you will, a titan bathed in the spotlight, someone who was once an untouchable icon revered for his brilliance, now exposed to the unforgiving glare of judgment. The rich tapestries of his life began to fray as personal messages and audio snippets filled the courtroom, revealing a narrative previously hidden behind a confident facade. Each soundbite served as a shrill reminder of the disparity between Diddy the mogul and Diddy the man, a human being grappling with his vulnerabilities amidst an onslaught of public dissection. This duality evokes vivid imagery of a performer on stage, each note carefully orchestrated, yet punctuated with the raw, emotional undercurrent of doubt. Diddy's bravado was but a mask, a chrysalis cleverly fashioned to protect him from the chaos of his own reality. But the question loomed large in the air. What happens when the performer can no longer keep the show afloat? The shockwaves of the leaked audio cascaded through the courtroom like echoes in a canyon, reverberating with the weight of raw emotion. Diddy's voice emerged, trembling with a paradox of defensiveness and desperation. Words flowed from him in ragged intensity, revealing layers of anger, regret, and fragility. Each sentence seemed to harbor a shadow of the man who once declared himself invincible, now reduced to pleading for an understanding that felt painfully out of reach. In the realm of psychology, we often discuss the concept of identity crisis, a phenomenon where individuals struggle to reconcile their public persona with their true self. Diddy's emotional outpouring, as heart-wrenching as it was, forced us to grapple with this universal struggle. As spectators, we could feel the chaos inside him mimicking a storm at sea, turbulent, capricious, and full of hidden undercurrents that could easily drag one under if not anchored by realism and genuine acceptance. Some would argue that Diddy's celebrity status afforded him protections unknown to the average person, blinding him to the repercussions of his actions. Yet these leaked audio clips didn't just unveil an immediate scandal, they peeled back the layers of humanity that laced through the facade. Each syllable shared an intimacy with the audience. They learned about the weight of remorse he carried,
and the emotional burden of a man reckoning with his choices. The courtroom itself became a microcosm of society, a charged arena where the lines between empathy and judgment blurred. Societal voices banded together in a cacophony of outrage and concern, navigating the deep wells of expectation nestled within the hefty mantle of fame. It's fascinating how the public narrative can twist and turn, consumed by the hunger for sensational stories, while simultaneously bereft of the compassion that lies at the heart of human experience. The moment Diddy began to unravel, he called into question not just his worthiness, but those of all who lingered in the shadows of celebrity culture. Yet the story paused as a prosecutor stood at the forefront, wielding evidence like a scalpel. Mister, with each pointed accusation, it was as though the prosecutor tossed a pebble into a still pond, causing ripples that spread far and wide. Bear in mind, there lies a powerful truth in the duality of forgiveness. While everyone deserves grace, many struggle to extend that mercy to those they idolize. In the courtroom, this principle danced an intricate ballet with the harsh reality of justice. It illuminated how fame can warp perceptions, creating this mythos around individuals made flawless by light, shade, and ultimately human imperfections. Diddy responded, his defenses rising in a visceral upheaval. "You misunderstand. These moments don't define who I am." His voice cracked under the weight of outrage, and with that passionate declaration, the crowd was drawn into a psychological dynamic that often plays out in our own lives: the struggle for validation, dignity, and understanding in a world quick to condemn. Here, Diddy reminded us often unceremoniously that the journey towards redemption begins with personal awareness. In grappling with his truth, one could witness the shedding of layers, drawing attention to how often society forgets to see the flawed nuances behind the flashbulbs in magazine covers. Humanizing him, if only for a fleeting moment, we became spectators to a stage that echoed back our own insecurities and trials. As the proceedings continued, the soundtrack of Diddy's unraveling played back, accompanied by flashes of heated exchanges. With each overheard squabble and retreat, the courtroom transformed into a battleground of thoughts and emotions. The struggle exemplified a critical psychological showdown, wrestling between the desire to uphold one's image while simultaneously pleading for understanding. The courtroom, now a pressure cooker, infused with the intensity surrounding Diddy's battle, resulted in no one being a mere observer. The intricate web of personalities shifted again, as Mackenzie Banks stood tall, brushing aside the implications woven into the accusations. Her quiet strength permeated the room, demanding an acknowledgement of complexity within the narrative. The words felt heavy, laced with unvarnished truth.
Here, we bring in the concept of emotional intelligence, the ability to understand, use, and manage emotions in positive ways to relieve stress, communicate effectively, empathize with others, and overcome challenges. Diddy's spiral through the courtroom highlights a core element of emotional resilience, the painful but necessary journey of self-discovery. The audience felt a connection, not only to Diddy's battle, but to their own introspections, a reminder of the missteps we all must face in the dance of life's trials. He was fierce now, his voice blending pride and vulnerability into something almost tangible. The pacing held weight, transformative energy wrapped tightly within those words, echoing the philosophy of facing one's demons and rising anew. The emotional release reverberated, reaching even the most hardened hearts in attendance. He encapsulated both the triumphs and failures of growth, positioning himself not merely as a figure of the past, but as symbolically intertwined with the possibilities of the future. But as the emotional roller coaster continued, a sharp interjection came from the back of the courtroom. A voice demanded to be heard. The stunned silence that fell over the room painted an eerie landscape, punctuating the challenges of navigating the waters of personal responsibility. Moments like this are critical in understanding that every interaction, every emotional crescendo carries weight. The psychological phenomenon of social proof came into play. Those around him witnessed his emotional unraveling, each person grappling with their own perceptions of right and wrong. As the courtroom spilled into chaos, it mirrored how we often confront difficult truths, with defensiveness masked as pride,
or through the lens of vulnerability and openness. Each person present was compelled to question their own thresholds, resigned to confront the discomfort we all face when flaws are laid bare. Diddy's plight became universal, illustrating the uncomfortable yet insightful reality of shared humanity. In those moments, defenses came tumbling down, revealing that at our core, we each wield our own armor. Perhaps the real question should be, what is the cost of putting it aside? As the tumult settled, the spotlight turned back on Diddy, the weight of the moment heavy as all eyes shifted. He looked out over the courtroom, staring intently at the assembly, that collective body of witnesses, revealing his call to connect with their shared experience, an act that bore immense courage.
Anger seeped from the edges of shame, transforming with a quiet resolve into desperation for connection. I am flawed, but I am trying. Isn't that what we are all doing? His words reverberated, echoing against the walls, laying bare the quest for authenticity in an artificial world. There, in that crucible, the power to evoke compassion delicately hung, waiting in the balance. As the reflections of Diddy's journey tugged at heartstrings, a feeling shifted in the courtroom, a collective pivot toward hoping to understand rather than judge. Would this epiphany solidify the path toward redemption, or push him further into the chaos? Time hung suspended as the audience collectively braced for the inevitable fallout of this courtroom drama. Where would the threads of this interplay lead next? Would the desire for connection transform the narrative? Or would it plunge the courtroom and Diddy further into an abyss of unforeseen consequences? The cameras rolled, the world held its breath, and the future of a man, recognized as a celebrity and yet so deeply human, lay suspended in haunting stillness. As the courtroom awaited the next turn, questions hung thick in the air, lingering like promises, accusations, and half-formed revelations. The stage was set for the next chapter, a story that pulsed with vitality and uncertainty, a reminder that beneath the shine of fame lies a tumultuous human narrative just begging to be heard. Diddy's saga was not just a singular incident, it was a complex dance of life, echoing the realities of our own struggles for authenticity amidst the clamor of societal expectations. What happens next, as the stage confronts reality, is anyone's guess. What happens when fame, power, and entitlement collide? In the surreal setting of a courtroom, the boundaries of sanity and chaos blur as the reigning king of hip-hop himself, Sean Diddy Combs, finds himself caught in a whirlwind of revelation and despair. What lay beneath the glossy exterior of a man often seen as untouchable, the maestro of music's grand stage? The moment the shocking audio leaks erupted, we were thrown into a tumultuous landscape of a psyche spiraling out of control. What did these tapes reveal? How far had Diddy strayed from the image he painstakingly cultivated? As the noise of the courtroom subsided, all that lingered was a heavy silence where the palpable tension rested on the shoulders of those gathered. Witnesses, jurors, and onlookers alike felt a collective shiver, their minds racing as the snippets replayed in loops inside their heads. Diddy, the man who had orchestrated chart-topping records and built an empire that spanned decades, was suddenly exposed as a flawed, fallible human being. His voice echoed through the controlled chaos. "Do you think I'm cruel?" The words hung like smoke in the air, filled with an intensity that was both haunting and revealing. He wasn't merely a celebrity caught in a scandal. He was a man grappling with demons that threatened to consume him. Here lay the crux of his vulnerability, raw and unfiltered, leading us to explore the deeper questions within ourselves. What does power do to those who wield it? And how do they confront their choices when those choices start to unravel? The spectacle unfurled like a dark tapestry, possessing an almost cinematic quality as the audience witnessed the evolution of Diddy's character. As the court reporters scribbled away, the audio files played back revelations of anger, frustration, and most tellingly, regret. It was a crash course in human failing, the prosecutor challenged, bearing the unvarnished truth of the matter. This wasn't simply about betrayal or broken trust. It was about a man confronted with his legacy, a legacy now marred with the stain of vulnerability. The courtroom transformed into a battlefield where legacy met reality, forcing Diddy into a psychological crucible. In social psychology, we often discuss the concept of dissonance,
the mental discomfort experienced when holding two conflicting beliefs. Diddy, standing there, was living that very dissonance. He was a titan of industry who once seemed impenetrable, yet now, stripped of his armor, he faced the consequences of actions that contradict his cultivated image. The tapes reflected not just personal regrets, but societal judgments, leaving an audience in a state of moral ambiguity. Picture this. Diddy, once the embodiment of swagger, began to fracture under the weight of self-revelation. He exploded, the raw emotion spilling into every corner of the room. The defensiveness woven through his words was both universal and deeply personal. We've all stood on precipices of vulnerability, moments when we became prisoners of our own insecurities. As those haunting audio clips spread through the courtroom like wildfire, morphing in tone and urgency, they ignited something deeper in the public consciousness. Our yearning to understand what fuels a person to inflict pain upon others while grappling with their own agony. It became ever clearer that the real story lay not only in Diddy's words, but in the myriad emotions they unleashed. With layered complexity, he grappling with the reality that was slowly caving in around him. You think I didn't love them? His vulnerability pierced through the surface, forcing the audience, both in the room and beyond, to reflect. Was he merely a villain? Or was he a man on a quest for redemption, ensnared by the very chaos he created? So many stories of fame narrate the rise and the inevitable fall. Yet, here we had the rare opportunity to witness someone not just succumb to their own faults, but actually confront them amid the fury of public scrutiny. It's a relatable juxtaposition. While many dream of the accolades that come with fame, few understand the labyrinthine pitfalls. Diddy wasn't just a name. He became every one of us dealing with our failures, striving yet faltering, yearning for another chance. As these audio clips continued to play, a montage emerged, spinning a narrative fraught with blunt honesty and sorrow. You're not the only one affected by my choices. The depth of pain in his voice began to resonate, peeling back a layer that few have the courage to reveal. At that moment, he wasn't just Diddy, the businessman. He was Sean Combs, an individual grappling for meaning amidst the fray. We weren't just voyeurs of a scandal. We became participants in an exploration of the human experience. Much like a moth drawn to a flame, audiences often find they're captivated by the raw, unfiltered chaos of life. There's a magnetic pull to vulnerability. It speaks to our shared humanity. As the courtroom listened intently, it became clear that what lay before them went beyond legal implications. Here was a man's life playing out in real time, challenging societal perceptions of success and failure. Someone shouted from the back, breaking the tension. "What do you want?" It was a question that resonated through the court, hanging in the air like a poignant arrow aimed straight at the heart of the matter. What did Diddy want?
Was it the absolution he sought?
Or was it understanding, connection, something more than mere validation that could wash away the shame?
The question was amplified, echoing beyond the courtroom walls, pushing us to consider our paths and the complexities within. As the day unfolded, we witnessed Diddy wrestle with perceptions that shaped the narrative of his life, illustrating the intense pressure that cloaks those in the limelight. The audience, often paralyzed by their own fear of judgment, found solidarity in Diddy's despair. With each twist of his narrative, he carved a path toward the heart of his truths, reflecting a mirror held up to society's collective soul. The outline of humanity began to emerge, a resonant truth rooted in the psychology of the wounded. When one's legacy starts to fracture, there's an instinctive desire to hold on tight, to defend what feels threatened. I built this empire with blood, sweat, tears. Diddy's voice trembled, and through this anguished outcry, it became evident. His battle extended beyond personal culpability. It was a war with his own legacy, beliefs, and the person that society constructed around him. The courtroom was a microcosm of society, a living, breathing experiment in empathy and hubris. It begged the questions that many feel. Can we separate the artist from the person?
Must we cast judgments on those we idolize? The recorded dialogues serve not only as a testament to Diddy's struggles, but as poignant reflections of our own inner dialogues in moments of embarrassment or missteps.
As the final audio clips played out, the atmosphere crescendoed toward a climax.
Diddy stood, avant-garde in bearing, a poignant portrait of rage and regret glamorized against the backdrop of his fame. He called out, a flare of desperation coursing through the courtroom. In those fervent moments, the air shimmered with intensity as everyone present grappled with a single underlying truth. Vulnerability is not a weakness, but rather an ancestral strength that binds us all. And in this dance of chaos, they began to unravel the fabric of their lives and the stories that enveloped them, their own shadows surfacing in unison with Diddy's struggle. But just as a symphony reaches its apex, a harsh discord shattered the moment. "Your Honor," came a sudden interruption from the prosecution, the room plunging once more into thick tension.
The judge raised an eyebrow,
The weight of a million questions pressing against the edges of each consciousness within the room. The stakes of humanity hung delicately suspended as a battle raged behind the scenes, a rush toward a conclusion steeped in uncertainty. Mr. Combs' emotional diatribe doesn't absolve him of responsibility. The gravity of this moment reached deeper, spiraling outward to challenge not only Diddy's narrative, but the very foundations of accountability within celebrity culture. Each word erected a chasm, echoing through the hall like the closing crescendo of a haunting score. For every measure of sympathy, there lurked tenfold doubt and judgment clamoring for a restraining hold on Diddy. It mirrored the societal ideations that often bubble beneath cultures of fame, where even the most luminous figures struggle under the weight of expectation. As Diddy prepared to respond, a palpable uncertainty hung in the air, creating a perfect storm of mixed feelings. Were they ready to face the man he emanated, or the fragile human missing in plain sight? In that single heartbeat, the courtroom prepared to plunge deeper into the divide of judgment and understanding, a duality each of us has faced at some point in our lives. Here, as the threads of humanity entwined with celebrity downfall, the real question lingered like smoke. Could Diddy emerge from this tempest, not simply as a celebrity, but as a changed man? Would the revelations ignite a path of clarity, or drag him further down the rabbit hole? As everyone braced for the inevitable final curtain, the pulse of anticipation surged, stretching toward the unknown and making it clear that judgment was only one layer in the tapestry of existence. This was a tale as old as time itself, the fragile nature of human identity, forever battling against the chaos of consequence and the infinite quest for redemption. And just like that, the stage was set for something astronomical, an emotional reckoning for a soul caught in the crossfire of intertwining truths. The future was uncertain. The threads of Diddy's destiny were bound tightly, waiting for the next movement in this heart-stopping symphony. As the courtroom sat on the edge of revelation, one thing became clear. The journey was far from over. What happens when the facade of a superstar crumbles in real time, revealing the raw nerve of desperation and denial?
when Diddy, the titan of hip-hop and entrepreneur extraordinaire, faced a courtroom filled with angry judgment and piercing scrutiny, everything he had built began to tremble. His carefully maintained image was cracking under the weight of shocking audio leaks, exposing the vulnerability beneath the bravado, a sight that rattled not just the gallery but the very core of his identity. As the gavel struck down, silencing the murmurs, the atmosphere thickened with tension, thick enough to slice. Seated before a judge and a jury, Diddy found himself at the intersection of public perception and private torment. Gone were the days of indulgent parties and glamorous lifestyles. Here was a man stripped bare, grappling with the naked truths of his own tumultuous choices. The revelation came like a thunderclap, the audio clips slicing through the courtroom air with brutal honesty, each word echoing the gravity of his inner turmoil. The comments he made, leaked and twisted, painted a picture of a man at war with himself, oscillating between anger, regret, and an almost childlike plea for understanding. "Do you see what I'm dealing with?" The desperation in his voice clawed its way into the hearts of many witnessing. There it was,
the embodiment of emotional conflict laid bare. But let's pause and truly grasp the magnitude of this spectacle unfolding. Psychology teaches us about cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort that arises from holding two conflicting beliefs. Diddy was caught in that dissonance. The celebrity he was projected to be collided drastically with the human being standing before the court. Here was a figure once revered for his trailblazing path, now being scrutinized for his very human flaws and vulnerabilities. Imagine standing in his shoes, revered by millions, yet suddenly stripped down in front of a multitude who relish in the drama of your downfall. The takes revealed him grappling with this dual identity, oscillating between the fear of losing everything and the denial that he had crossed lines. He bellowed, rage coursing through every syllable. The fear in his voice echoed universally. How often have we faced judgment for our mistakes, wielded our own narratives to defend ourselves against harsh truths? As the prosecutor laid out the incriminating audio, it felt like watching a once vibrant canvas gradually unveiling layers of darkness. The narrative told through Diddy's words was a complex tale of self-discovery woven into the fabric of celebrity culture. His outburst jumped from defiance to vulnerability, revealing a man who felt cornered, grasping at straws of identity amidst the chaos. Would he be able to redefine himself, or was this reckoning destined to consume him? All around him the spectators leaned closer, their expressions torn. Some exhibited intrigue, witnessing a fall from grace that felt oddly familiar. Others mirrored his desperation and grief, acknowledging the painful reality woven into their own lives. The courtroom transformation was akin to a grand amphitheater, where empathy and judgment danced together in an electrifying pas de deux. Then, almost imperceptibly, an undercurrent of rebellion began to pulse through the walls of the courtroom. Diddy grasped the mic, a symbolic lifeline, and implored his audience, "What makes me different from any one of you?" A flicker of hope surged in his words, imploring understanding, as if reaching out to a community often quick to vilify. Psychologically, this phenomenon mirrors the concept of shared humanity, an inclination to relate to others, an understanding that beneath every mistake is a story of choices made in desperate situations. In moments of vulnerability, barriers often dissolve, allowing us to examine our imperfections and those of others. The audience, in that moment, had the chance to realize that they too could just as easily face similar judgments, retorted a voice from the gallery, stark and accusatory. The ripples of outrage intensified. The remark latched onto societal norms that critique the privileged, failing to recognize their suffering. Diddy's voice rose again, simmering with frustration. "You think my life's a dream?" In that moment, the struggle deepened, a poignant reminder that personal turmoil often hides beneath the surface, disguised by wealth and fame. The courtroom shifted like a tempest, emotions churning, as Diddy's defenses began to crack. Yet within those cracks lay fragments of truth. With every accusation hurled at him, he wrestled with societal expectations, a truth reflected not just within his life, but within us all. Each of us has faced moments where the harsh glare of judgment redefined our reality, questioned our very existence. Diddy's battle resonated. The struggle between external validation and personal truth flared like a bright flame threatening to extinguish. Isn't that what we all crave?
It was the kind of plea that clawed at hearts,
conjuring memories of humanity being filtered through lenses of criticism.
an impoverished capacity to empathize in a world often too quick to condemn. As the tension built, a poignant memory bubbled in the courtroom, a moment that showcased Diddy's rise from the ashes of struggle. Flashback to the 1990s, a young Sean Combs full of dreams, navigating through the gritty streets of New York, hustling to create a life that seemed tantalizingly out of reach. Navigating that labyrinth of ambition was a journey rife with obstacles, each moment defined by grit and tenacity. This was the power of storytelling. It reminded us that the man before us was still the same dreamer, albeit now worn down by the weight of his choices. Suddenly, a realization dawned. This courtroom drama wasn't just about Diddy. It held a mirror to society, reflecting our collective fears of failure and shame.
The psychologically complex dance of what if fluttered like a specter in the air. What if the choices we make define us? What if the burden of expectation becomes too heavy to bear? In Diddy, we saw fragments of ourselves, the gnarled branches of insecurity reaching toward the light, yearning for validation while frantically grappling with doubt. Tensions crescendoed when the defense team's lawyer stepped forward, attempting to untangle the web woven by the prosecutors. Ladies and gentlemen, let's remember that the strongest adversaries often lie within our hearts, he began. The words ricocheted in the air, igniting a spark of hope, but would it be enough to sway public opinion? The unpredictability of human emotions swirled amongst the spectators. This isn't just about Diddy, it's about all of us, shouted a fair-minded juror. It was a moment, a breakthrough, perhaps. Diddy grasped it, the raging storm within him temporarily calmed, revealing a spirit fighting for redemption. He flashed a weary but heartfelt smile, recognition blossoming in an instant. But even amidst the budding compassion, the stakes remained high. The world had its eyes fixed upon this drama, eager to pick apart every detail. Would these insights lead Diddy towards redemption, or would they ultimately lead to his undoing? Would the courtroom's sobering reminders of humanity's fragility grant him a new lease on life, or become the final nail in his coffin? Diddy's voice quivered slightly as a darkness flickered in his eyes. I am not my mistakes, but I bear them. The words tumbled forth like water from a broken dam, cascading through the courtroom. It was a powerful moment, stunning in its authenticity. As court members momentarily paused in reflection, could these confessions be a precursor to a new chapter, perhaps even a rebirth? But then, like a clap of thunder, the prosecutor chimed in. And yet these mistakes have consequences. You must take responsibility for your actions, Mr. Combs. The statement felt like a cold spray of water, a piercing reminder of the stakes at play, echoing the harsh realities that accompany poor choices. Each word held a mirror against Diddy's soul, juxtaposing remorse and responsibility in a tangled weave. As the courtroom sat in silence, that was when Diddy caught the gaze of a juror, a young woman, gripping her pens tightly, perhaps feeling the weight of her own secrets, a flicker of recognition, passing between two souls who knew what it felt like to bear shame and regret. In that instant, the courtroom transformed once more. Two individuals who existed worlds apart found solidarity in shared humanity. Diddy's voice dropped to a raw whisper. The power of transformation hung in the air, but could he truly reinvent his legacy before the world, amid intense scrutiny? The potent mix of despair and determination oozed from every pore, amplifying the stakes significantly. Yet, behind the scenes, tension stirred like a tempest. The media frenzy exploded outside the courtroom, churning with rumors and speculation, predicting Diddy's ultimate fate. Across social media feeds, hashtags blossomed, moments encapsulated, conversations ignited, echoed across platforms, a rallying cry for many curious observers awaiting the next turn. What would the public response reveal about us as a society? Outside, as the echoes of his courtroom dramas reverberated on news channels, the possibility of redemption slipped between the fingers of fate, pulse racing with anticipation. Whispers filled the air, a courtroom battle evolving from a mere legal spectacle into an examination of humanity. Then, just as the gavel was poised to strike again, something crucial preoccupied the collective consciousness. A new audio leak appeared unexpectedly, this time from a different angle, portraying Diddy's past self, candid moments captured during heart-to-heart interviews, where he shared aspirations, fears, and hopes for a future beyond the glittering facade. I want to be a voice for the unheard, a beacon of hope when others can't see the light, he had once passionately shared, dreaming of transcending the industry and embracing a more meaningful legacy. With the release of the newer tapes, the courtroom reverberated with oscillating echoes of hope and despair, complicating the narrative surrounding Diddy's life. Audience members clutched their seats, teetering on the precipice of understanding, as if each word could reshape the identity of the man standing amidst judgment. The curtain of momentous revelations lifted slowly, as Diddy's journey emerged clearer, one shaped by mistakes but bolstered by ambition, a sworn commitment to craft authenticity amid chaos. How would he reconcile the disparate pieces of his identity? Would he recognize that beneath the surface lay an opportunity for radical transformation, a chance to use his past not as a shackle, but as a scaffold to lift others? The tension reached a heart-stopping zenith, resonating within every heart present. Could he turn it all around? Could the tempest of chaos heed the call to evolution, enriching his storyline and reclaiming the narrative of a human grappling with life? As the gavel poised to strike down once more, all shared a singular heartbeat, knowing that at this intersection of despair and hope lay the path toward redemption, the potential to rise from the ashes as something greater. The air pulsed with uncertainty and expectation as they waited for a culmination, a new beginning hidden within an ancient tale, one deeply rooted in humanity's quest for understanding amid turbulence, what pain intertwined with growth. And so, as the courtroom teetered on the edge of revelation, one lingering truth permeated the air. Every story is a tapestry woven with threads of hope and despair. And in this crucible of existence, we must all choose how to define ourselves against the backdrop of our mistakes. The unfolding drama promised twists and turns, with every eye drawn in, clinging to the final act, where the world would discover whether Diddy would arise like a phoenix or succumb to the raging storm of his choices. As the courtroom held its breath, bracing for the echoes of future actions, the question loomed larger than life itself. In the heart of chaos, who would he ultimately become? What if the very foundation on which a powerhouse built his empire started to crumble before the world's eyes? Imagine the once revered icon Diddy, a name synonymous with success, innovation, and luxury, suddenly confronting an array of accusations that shake him to his core. In a courtroom drama that could be pulled straight from the wildest script, the tides turned when leaked audio recordings revealed a man grappling with the darkness within while desperately clinging to his constructed image. As the judge's gavel echoed through the room, an unsteady silence enveloped Diddy. The air was electric, thick with tension, as whispers rippled through the gallery. It was not merely a trial. It was a confrontation with the inner demons that had long lurked beneath the glossy veneer of fame. Each moment unfolded like a surreal battle, leaving the audience at the edge of their seats, unsure whether to root for redemption or to question his very humanity. What would you do if suddenly thrust into the spotlight, your own words weaponized against you? In those pulsating seconds of dread, Diddy's carefully crafted persona began to unravel. The tapes were damning, revealing not just admissions, but a spectrum of raw emotions. Fear, anger, regret. The cacophony of his past few months surged forth, coalescing in anguished pleas. "I'm not an awful person." The urgency of his voice soared, echoing the desperation felt by many when faced with inexorable judgments, the primal instinct to fight back when backed against a wall. Stripped of his armor, Diddy stood before a courtroom of spectators whose lives had long mirrored his, battles fought within their own consciousness, grappling with insecurities and choices made under pressure. The concept of cognitive dissonance, where one struggles between their ideals and their actions, was palpably evident. Here was a man at war with himself. This wasn't just about legal repercussions, it was about the painful unraveling of a man shaped by complexity. Diddy's inner strength, previously showcased through his music and empire, clashed violently with the vulnerability laid bare by the revelations. It was like witnessing a grand symphony descend into disarray, each note borrowing from a reservoir of emotions, deceit, nostalgia, resilience. The sound of his stammering honesty resonated deeply, a stark reminder of our shared humanity. Hardships, after all, carry an inherent relatability. The juxtaposition was staggering. We often idolize resilience without acknowledging the weight it carries. A study by psychologist Brené Brown elucidates this truth. She draws a parallel between vulnerability and strength, suggesting that embracing our imperfections allows us to connect deeply with others. Diddy, now in the crucible of judgment, tapped into that very vulnerability, turning the lenses of scrutiny back on the audience. As the prosecutor droned on, the silence in the room was deafening. Listeners found themselves morphing from onlookers into a collective jury. The stakes pulled palpable responses from them. A shared acknowledgement of their own mistakes emerged. Were we, by having judged him, simply grasping at shadows of our own failings? How often do we deny ourselves compassion while clinging to the righteous armor we weave from our judgments? With every manipulated audio clip, the atmosphere changed. Diddy was no longer merely a celebrity, he morphed into a narrative of sacrifice, a tragic hero clinging to a shroud of inadequate coping mechanisms. A swell of emotion rose, the courtroom transformed into an arena not just for judgment, but for reflection on the fragility of the human experience. As testimony unfolded, layers upon layers of Diddy's persona came to light. The bravado contrasted sharply with a glimpse of desperation. He exclaimed, raw and vulnerable. In that moment, many remembered their own thirst for acceptance, a longing to outrun failure. Time and again, lives intersect over cohorts of shared desires, failures, and aspirations. And yet it was when Diddy turned to the jury, with fierce eyes, sincerity catching the light in the courtroom, that the stakes became overwhelmingly visceral. There's a monster inside of me, yes, but can't you see? The truth of that statement hung heavy in the air, a mirror held up to the culture fostering celebrity worship. Stripping away humanity in favor of spectacle. His words harken back to research on social psychology that delves into how fame skews human interaction. The line between admiration and vilification is razor thin, particularly in today's digitally saturated world. We've built a culture of sensationalism, where celebrities tread a treacherous path between idol and scapegoat. Each falling star embodies a profound paradox, hallowed by their achievements, yet tormented by the scrutiny that follows. The courtroom itself felt like a grand stage. The audacious play unfolding didn't just expose Diddy. It shone light on a greater narrative, the human condition, a dissection of fame's bittersweet allure, wrapped around our innate need for connection. The unscripted authenticity stirred something deep within the hearts of those present. Each stinging utterance from Diddy sent ripples through lives that understood, inherently, the burdens of expectation and judgment. Suddenly he paused, breaking the explicit rhythm of the testimony. Breathing heavily, there lay the fierceness of vulnerability entrenched in each deliberate word. A monologue designed to expose raw feelings, it resonated intimately, catalyzing reflections on the internal struggles masked behind facades. This was not just a trial, but a reclamation of the self, and Diddy's wild dance of emotions must have reverberated through everyone's internal monologues. Drifting through the minds of those hearing his plea, a powerful metaphor emerged. Picture a tree battered by harsh winds yet rooted in the earth, resilient despite its scars. Diddy stood stripped, roots exposed but alive, a symbol of growth amidst disarray. His admissions, now an introspective dive, reminded all present of their fragility against the storms of life. As the day lingered, just when it seemed the momentum would reach a breaking point, tensions skyrocketed. The prosecutors launched an explosive counterattack, their testimonies packed with vivid details designed to paint him as a tyrant overtaken by power. The air crackled with indignation, condemnation danced with understanding in a captivating ballet. But in the ensuing chaos, Diddy reclaimed the stage with an urgency that trapped everyone in a palpable tension. I may have lost my way, yes, but does that mean I can't strive for change? With each desperate syllable, the assembled witnesses realized he wasn't merely asking for redemption. He was challenging them to reconsider their own narratives. A potent wave of reflection washed over the room, diminishing the divide between Diddy and humanity. How many among them had experiences that mirrored his struggles? Immediate arrests of judgment began to melt away. The walls, so tightly bound by preconceived notions, started to fragment. The unspoken question lingered: is it possible to reconcile the mistakes of our past while creating a future we can be proud of? As Diddy spoke, hope vibrated in the space between breaths. The audience found themselves clenched between the existential struggle of choice and the glaring truth of consequences. Each personal anecdote he wove had begun to bleed into their own realities. A soft voice echoed from the back, igniting murmurs among the spectators.
Each person realized this courtroom was more than a place of judgment. It was a tapestry of shared stories, a mosaic reflecting the nuances of the human experience. The climax arrived abruptly. As the day's proceedings wound down, the overwhelming weight of the proceedings began to catch up with everyone present. The emotional upheaval was brewing, the energy electric. Diddy stood across from the jury, the weight of histories clashing in the very depths of their understanding. "Do I deserve to be defined by a few choices?" Those words erupted like a wildfire, igniting a pivotal introspection among the jury and spectators. And just as the light began to break through the tumult, the gavel fell, catalyzing the next phase of the narrative. The question that lingered in the air was simple yet piercing. What will become of Diddy now? Would he channel the energy of this moment into profound change, or was he destined to remain a hero trapped in a maelstrom of despair? The audience found themselves not merely spectators, but participants in Diddy's journey. In that charged atmosphere, transformed from a mere courtroom to a powerful arena of self-reflection, an omnipresent question hung invisibly, plunging deep into the hearts of everyone present. Could Diddy learn from this, redefine himself, and emerge as both a phoenix rising and a voice for others? As the courtroom filing doors open, a profound sense of mystery enveloped the moment, leaving everyone both anxious and eager to discover how this saga would unfold. Groans and whispers filled the corridor as spectators spilled into the light. Diddy may have exposed his struggles, revealing his vulnerabilities amid accusations, but the tale was far from over. The world was left hanging on the precipice of transformation, both his and their own. What remained was the essence of redemption itself, beckoning from the sidelines. Those in attendance knew one thing for certain. The echoes of this courtroom would resound far beyond its walls, shaping narratives for many who faced the music of their own lives. Each encounter presenting a choice, whether to weather the storm or rise anew from the ashes of one's mistakes, stronger and more resilient than before. And so, as the chapter drew to a close, Diddy stepped further into the unknown, a complex sovereign of his narrative, weaving threads of remorse and hope into a new beginning. His journey, had only just begun,